This is the Don't Be Fun podcast. It's brought to you by a couple of opposites, me, Derek Schoonover, and Angela Bean. Each week we're going to tackle new topics from wildly different points of view with the hopes of finding some common ground. This week our first topic is going to be employment.
Yes.
Jobs.
Yes.
Having a job.
That's an issue these days.
It is.
For everybody.
It's a divisive issue.
It is.
Is that the right word? Divisive? Or it splits people apart?
It is a divisive issue because everybody has an opinion and it's informed by their circumstances.
Of course.
So no one's technically wrong.
Yeah, I agree. We've had arguments and issues about employment. We've talked about it quite a bit.
Yes.
And stuff. But, and so that I see as a kind of a microcosm of people's experience these days is everybody looks at it in a different way.
And I think the word itself is a very hot button word, the word work, because when one person hears that word, it may mean one thing, and someone else hears it and it means a completely different thing.
Yeah.
When I think of the word work, it's a positive thing in my mind as far as income, social interaction, that kind of thing. Very different when you think of the word.
Yes, I think of slavery. 100%. I think of chains and shackles and holding a person down. So I guess we look at it exactly the opposite way. You see it as a means to an end, and I see it as a waste.
Right, which I find interesting because how is it a waste if what you're doing is, like for instance, you want a car, and so you get a job to make money to buy a car.
Yeah.
So how is that a waste?
Well, I don't think the pursuit in itself is a waste necessarily. Well, okay, so maybe let me backtrack instantly from what I just said. It's possible that the pursuit in itself is exactly the waste. And so, this sort of, not to sound too whatever hippie or whatever, but the pursuit of material things, it's ultimately pointless in the end. And a job, which you see as a means to get those material things, it becomes the shackles. It becomes the reason. It's one of those. It's like an addiction. So you need the job to buy the stuff. You need the stuff to deal with the job.
Right.
So it becomes this circular thing where one thing.
Right. Which makes sense, and I can definitely see what you're talking about with that. But what if you're in a situation where you're a single parent and you have a small child, and you literally have no choice but to have to work for certain material things? You need shelter and food. Yeah. It just seems to me that a person has to reconcile themselves to the necessity of work. And if you've reconciled yourself to that, then it just becomes a matter of whether you like that particular job or you want to find a different job that you like better.
Yeah, I understand. I'm picking up what you're putting down there for sure. But again, I have a tendency to personally to go out and go the distance, to extrapolate way out and say that the necessities of this life are dictated by the sort of boundaries that are imposed on us societally, and I feel like a lot of people are waking up nowadays and saying, I didn't agree to this.
Right.
I understand that I am agreeing to it day to day as I live and do stuff in this world, but I didn't agree to it initially, and this doesn't have to be the way it is necessarily. I heard a thing that like 85% of work that is done is completely unnecessary. It's just busy work to keep people from going crazy.
Right.
You know?
And that's definitely true. And I know a lot of people who are very unfulfilled in the work that they're doing. And I think that's ultimately what you're talking about, is that you're spending a lot of your life, your time, in this place of employment. And if it's not fulfilling, then it makes your whole life feel like a waste. And I'm wondering, is it possible, no matter what the job is, to make it somehow fulfilling? Or do you think that is not really possible?
Well, I think it's personally, I think it's a very personal thing to people. So maybe some. This is gonna sound dickish, but maybe somebody's level. I'm really trying hard not to use the word intelligence or talent or drive or vision.
Okay, well, you just used all those words, so that's okay.
So
Go ahead.
just used every single one of them. So maybe those things on a person aren't as high or aren't as big or something or lofty maybe, and so they find like I don't know.
Oh, I think I get where you're
You
going.
know what I'm saying?
I think I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so it could be that somebody does walk into. Now this is I'm gonna even use a middle ground thing. Somebody does walk into a hospital and does work there and feels really fulfilled helping people and stuff. But it could be that, and I'm realizing that this is a bramble patch or whatever. But it could be that is sort of what their insides, their inner corridors is tailored for,
right?
And it does work, and maybe that's their art is they help somebody. And
so
hospitals are horrible places, by the way.
So maybe what you're saying is that not so much a blanket statement on people and work in general, but more maybe from the artist's perspective, since you are an artist, that maybe that's kind of what informs your take on it. My
take is definitely informed from that point of view, but even more or less from an artist's point of view, more from I hesitate to use any words. I hesitate to talk at all. Actually,
well, that's kind of what this is for. We're supposed to talk. So.
No, I hesitate to use the word anarchist, but I do feel like I have an anarchist a view of everything. I don't hold art in reverie. Well,
let me ask this question. Do you think there's a rational and possible alternative?
Yeah, but it's okay. No. I think the alternative is radical. It's completely out of the boundaries of what we're dealing with now, and it's uncomfortable, and it's ugly, and it's smelly.
So, like what? So, like,
really
what
shitty.
are some specifics?
So I would say that definitely the idea of smaller communities would give an optimal chance for people to feel fulfilled in what they're doing.
Right. I totally agree with you, but I think actually that's where we came from. That we already had that, and we've lost it.
Yeah.
And so it just doesn't seem possible that we can just somehow reverse it and go back to that. So instead, we have to kind of deal with the situation as it exists today. And that's what I'm wondering. As it exists today in this society, for a person who feels like you do, is there an alternative to going out and getting a job? Or is it possible to go out and get a job and not feel like that is crushing your spirit? Kind of.
Yeah. I don't think to get a job at any place that is is a traditional business is going to offer anybody 100% satisfaction, 100% fulfillment.
Right.
If I'm, I don't think that's possible.
Well, right, but wouldn't you agree though that most people find most of their fulfillment outside of work, in their relationships and the things that they do, and the work is just kind of a necessary component of what they consider their main life.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a relatively new development in human civilization. It feels old to us because it's been our entire life.
Right.
I think there could be never anything different. But I believe that kind of started out with the Industrial Revolution and seeing people less as people, more as like cogs, and seeing cities less as like places for people, towns for people to live in, and more like places to store your slaves. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so you said something before, and I mentioned this in a different podcast, but there was a song that came out, and it was called "Unfuck the World." And when I told you, I was like, "This is a cool song. It's called Unfuck the World." like it's a cool video about what's going on in the world, and you're like, you can't unfuck something. Once it's fucked, it's
Way
fucked.
to be a bummer.
Yeah, and it's fucked. And I was like, huh, you make a good point. It's the literal phrasing of it is something you cannot do. It's impossible to do, and that's what it seems like where we're at right now, is what we have here isn't sustainable alongside.
In the world, not you and I.
Yes, no, it's in the world.
Yeah.
Isn't sustainable alongside, or no, not alongside, but intermingled with something radically different.
You're right. And what I kind of have a sense of is that people are becoming more and more aware every day. And as that happens, they're becoming less and less satisfied with the status quo. And that's a very dynamic time and a very tense time, because we don't know what the future looks like yet. We don't know how to necessarily make the change happen, but I think we're all aware that change is happening. And it's a time of insecurity, I think, and that's why the job thing has become such a big deal, because employers are able to exploit this insecurity that people have and say, look, you don't know what'll happen to you if you lose this job. You better be willing to do anything to keep this job.
Yeah.
And that is obviously going to interfere with the normal human desire for dignity and respect and being treated as an autonomous adult as opposed to a child or a slave. And that's what seems to be changing in the workplace, is we're not being treated like adults. We're being treated like children in the workplace. And we're not supposed to notice that. So it's not supposed to affect us at all.
Yeah.
But how could it not?
Exactly. How could it not affect your spirit?
Yes.
It's like if you're drinking from a well and the water tastes fine, but it is poisoned minutely, it'll kill you eventually. You will be affected by it, and that's what it feels like today. What do you think awareness is even manifesting as? Do you feel like there's a I may not ask that question right. How do you see this like a rise in awareness manifesting?
You mean, how do I see it happening right now?
Yeah, right now.
Well, I just think it's very clear that every day, each individual, and I'm speaking on a large scale, but also on a very individual scale. Individually, we are waking up every day and starting to open our eyes more and more and more to things that have always been there, but we just were trained not to look.
Yeah.
And now it's becoming impossible not to see.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like a child that's growing up. And as the child grows out of its innocence and out of its, ignorance, for lack of a better word, it starts to reassess everything. And so, for instance, if you want to use something really obvious, once a child can walk, it doesn't want to crawl anymore. And so once we as human beings are becoming aware of ourselves as having a place in the world, I don't even know how to put it, but growing in a sense, we're still being treated like we're children by the authorities, by our bosses, by the police, by governments, etc. And so we're chafing at that, and that's a natural response to it. The right response from the authorities or whomever would be to recognize that we're growing, recognize that we're becoming more aware, and afford us more liberties as a result of that. That's what you do. You get more responsibility, but you also get more opportunities, and that's what's supposed to happen as you grow.
Yeah.
But it's not happening here. We're being treated like children that are supposed to remain children. So our growing awareness is helping us individually to grow, but we're being stifled in that growth by everything else around us.
Yeah.
And that's causing a lot of tension.
Do you feel like we're being stifled because the ceiling isn't being raised fast enough, or because the ceiling is being pushed down?
The ceiling's definitely being pushed down. It's been being pushed down for a long time. And it's coming down harder now because of the growth that's happening.
Yeah.
And the energy, that's, can you hear the dog?
It's possible. That's the testament
We put her to sleep,
to the electrifying nature of our conversation. Yeah, this is a pug snoring in the background. I hope that comes through loud and clear. I'm sorry, it was a total interruption.
Oh no, that's okay. I basically, I think I had said what I was gonna say.
That's good. That's what I felt like too. Is that not only are we, is the stifling coming across, like, it's happening actively, like we're not just growing against the ceiling,
Right.
but the ceiling is being
lowered,
and we're told it's being raised.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. And so it makes sense that we're confused and we're angry and we're frustrated, because that's the reasonable response to what's going on.
Yeah.
But somehow we still have to live our lives, go to work, raise our children, pay our bills, and so it's a really interesting time to be alive, because the combination of all of these things is really volatile.
Do you think we're like meant to be alive right now?
Yes.
That the people who are alive right now, that they're integral to what's happening, to the gear turning or whatever. That we're not just fodder, but
Right.
but we're actually like fuel. We're actually bringing about.
Well, that'll be a whole separate conversation, because I have lots to say about that.
Yeah.
But I would just, for the purpose of this podcast, I would just say that we're definitely not just fodder. We are here for a reason. It's no accident that we're alive right now.
Yeah.
Even though it looks like maybe in a lot of ways there's a lot of crazy things happening, we're here to see it.
Can I ask you a thing though? Do you think that that's inclusive? Do you think that there's a divide? Like, let's just say, like the I don't know, the us and the them. Is there an us and the them, or are we all necessary factors in what's happening? Is the yin and the yang complete?
Well,
like, is the Jefferson Beauregard sessions? Is this man integral to the revolution of the spirit that's seems to be occurring right now?
Oh my gosh, that's like 3 different conversations. We'll have to save some of that for next time. But just to summarize briefly, at this point, yes, we're all integral, all of us. And in a lot of ways, it's a play that's being put on. And what we're seeing is one side and the other side, but we're not necessarily seeing that there's something that connects them. Okay. And so to us it looks very black and white, us and them, good guys and bad guys. That's true in certain ways, but there's also a lot more to it than that, and we'll delve into all of that at another time, but we're getting way away from the work thing. So,
well, what's interesting too, I think, is that those guys all ostensibly have jobs.
Yes.
They're all employed.
Yes.
But it doesn't seem that way to us at all. It seems like they're in some rarefied air where they just do whatever the fuck they want to do.
Well, now that you're talking about another issue with work and the difficulty in generalizing that, because the work that people of a certain social class do doesn't bear much resemblance to the work of lower social classes.
Yeah.
So when you talk to someone of a lower social class and you talk about work, you're talking about hard, dirty, slave wages work. When you're talking about a different social class, it's a completely different experience. They don't have to punch a clock. They don't have to sit at their desk the whole time.
Yeah.
They're basically living their life during their work hours and being paid for it.
Yeah.
Because most of their life has to do with making money. Mm-hmm. So it's a whole different situation.
Making money on a different scale than most people.
Completely different scale. And that's, again, a whole nother conversation, class divide. Let's definitely get into that. But yeah, there's lots to unpack.
Okay. So, to ask you the same question that you asked me earlier, do you think the paradigm that we have for work and employment and as a means of survival, do you think that has a place in in the revolution? Do you think that it?
It's a really interesting question because things are moving at a very quick speed these days. So technology is already threatening to overtake a lot of the options that people have for jobs. And in that way, it doesn't seem like we can just continue to do the same old thing that we've always done and expect to make a living at it when technology is nipping at our heels as far as, replacing a lot of jobs, people with robots.
Yeah.
So it seems pretty clear there's going to have to be big changes. And from what it seems like right now, the plan of the upper social classes has been to make sure their people are very well educated, very well versed in technology, very well versed in international business techniques, and they have a lot of ways of supporting themselves and engaging in the world and so on. The people of a lower social class, it's completely the opposite. We are being demarginalized, pushed down, oppressed, all of these words apply. Mm-hmm. And they don't care if we can make a living.
Yeah.
They don't care if, someone can't pay their bills. Because from that other perspective, if you can't manage to figure out how to pay your bills, that's on you.
Yeah.
So they have no comprehension or empathy for the struggle. And so, their job and work situation is a completely different concept than what we would think of it as.
Well, we can even really imagine.
Yeah, exactly.
Right now. I mean, because there's no...
It upholds their dignity. It upholds their sense of autonomy. It allows them to function as adults.
Yeah.
That's the big difference between the boss and the employee. The employee is not supposed to be an equal.
Yeah.
In intelligence or in anything else.
Theoretically,
exactly.
Yeah. It seems to be a drive to, and this is going to be another thing that just sounds like a dickish thing to say, but there seems to be a drive to put a layer of idiocy, a layer of mediocrity in between the bottom of the ladder workers, which are the people that have to deal with the consumers too, of whatever the job is. To put a level of idiocy in between them and the people at the top.
You're absolutely right, and that's not being done by accident.
Yeah.
If you go back into history and you start looking into these things, what we're really operating under is kind of a combination or amalgamation of the communist hierarchical system and some of the systems that the Nazis used when they were working and doing their things in World War II, and I know that's a whole nother conversation, but
I'm gonna write down
just for the purpose of this conversation, it really bears mentioning, because these systems like what you're talking about, where you have it doesn't matter how intelligent that lower rung of the ladder is, they're going to be blocked by that middle layer, right, of idiocy that prevents them from ever getting past that to the top.
They're almost like unknowing gatekeepers to the...
Exactly.
They know they have the littlest bit of power, and that's inflated, in their head. And
right.
Yeah. See, it's really easy to go to they and us and we and us.
It is. It is.
And
we're trying to avoid doing that.
Trying to. Could I ask you a thing? Okay, this is going to be probably one of those ones that's off. It's another time. It's a bigger topic. So, I am a middle manager. So we talked about Jeff Sessions earlier. I use that guy as kind of an example of an ardent, just relishing in pushing down. It seems like he does actually see it in the reverse, to where I might see that guy as a bad person, and he would look at me and see a bad person. Right. And so do you think, now here's the issue, is in my head, I believe in retribution and forgiveness or whatever to the nth degree, kind of, so somebody can always change.
Wait, you just said retribution.
Did I say, what do I mean? Do you know what word I'm trying to get at?
Well, I think what you're trying to say is that it's possible that people can always change.
Yes.
So,
all the way to the end.
Yeah, right.
And then even further to that. But but I assume that he doesn't think the same thing about me.
Right. See, that's actually a really good point to make. That's an excellent point to make, because it's like what I was talking about earlier. They're treating us like children, but not necessarily seeing us as children, because you expect children to grow.
Yeah.
But we're not expected to grow because, as you said, they don't think we're capable of it.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, it's just a matter of gatekeeping all of us idiots that are threatening their wealth somehow.
It's like keeping us healthy enough to go to work.
Right.
Basically.
That's exactly right. Exactly.
I feel like we're seen as like a box of tissues, and when that box is empty, you don't wish for more tissues to grow. You just go get another box of tissues.
Yeah.
And so that tissues, whatever. But that's what it seems like. Is there's no upkeep. There's no preventative maintenance.
There's no genuine respect for. And there's a generalization, because obviously individual businesses, individual people have a great relationship with their boss, and that's wonderful.
Possible, yeah.
It's possible, and that's what we would hope for. And I think it's extremely possible, and the thing that prevents it from happening is simply that there's this power imbalance that we've been kind of taught means you can't possibly be equals. So, as an example, if I'm a secretary to someone else, even if we're equal in intelligence, that isn't acceptable, because this person is above me as my boss, so they for whatever reason, have to treat me as less intelligent in order to keep that power imbalance.
To keep the imagery up.
Right, but it's not really necessary. I mean, I can work for a person, even if we're equally intelligent. I don't feel bad about working for them. I like it. It's fun.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I want to maybe take a minute and just point out too that when we're talking about, I think that it gets brought up a lot of times of like they're not doing this for us and all this stuff like that. That it feels like it's a whining thing, like it's saying they're not looking out for our best interests, they're not looking out for this, and they're not looking out for that. And I understand, yeah, you do that thing. I understand personal responsibility for what you're supposed to do for yourself. I understand what you're supposed to do for yourself, but there is a very real funnel of money, which has been shown to us throughout our whole life to basically be life essence. This is how you live, is you have to have money.
Yeah.
And there's a very real funnel of money that comes out of our work and funds all of this.
Yes.
And so to say something like they're not looking out for our best interest isn't to say like we don't have personal responsibility for what we're doing. But if all of that life essence is being used to build a lower and lower ceiling,
very well said.
There's not much we can do with personal responsibility.
Exactly. I think at that point you're absolutely right. The personal responsibility at that point is what I guess the way I would put it is we can't affect the change that we want through having that responsibility, but we can affect a change within ourselves. So that at the very least, we're not fighting ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's the very first step, is a person divided against themselves isn't going to get very far at all. Exactly. So really the first step has to be being okay with yourself.
Love yourself.
You got
to find some love.
Yes.
You're
not going to find it in the workplace. You're not going to find it from the government.
It's an odd thing. I think that a lot of people these days, I can speak for myself, definitely, it feels like when I'm doing something, it feels like the dissatisfaction I have with it is that I'm not finding some kind of love that I want, there.
Right.
And And I think that I would like to think, well, I would like to, I would not like to, I wish it was different thing. I feel like a lot of people feel that way too.
Yeah.
That the dissatisfaction with the stuff that they have is just missing out on some fundamental type of love. You know?
I agree. And I would say even for the people who are uncomfortable with the word love, I would even say connection.
Yeah.
Just because at work, that's getting more and more scarce.
Yeah.
And in every aspect of life. And so even though, of course, we're fully connected with technology, that's a whole separate conversation.
That was a separate conversation. That was what I wanted to ask about. What do you think about automation? Do you think that this could create the utopia, the paradise where humans don't have to toil and slave and waste their bodies?
I actually think that's what we're going to be told.
But more likely,
I don't think that's accurate.
More likely, it'll be put in place in that sense, and then used to slaughter most of the people on the planet
Pretty
and
much.
create a utopia
Well,
for an upper class echelon of lizard
The
people.
way that I would put it to you this way, I would say this: in this world, unless you're talking about individual people now,
Mm-hmm.
like nothing is done for altruistic reasons.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And on the individual level, there's absolutely the possibility of altruism. But in a group, if a group gets too big,
Right.
if a group grows to a corporation,
Yes.
if cooperation turns to corporation,
There you go. That's right.
we
That's
must
right.
burn it to the ground.
Well said. That's a good.
Right.
That's a good way to end that segment.
That is good. On to the next thing. That was good. That was good. It didn't end in tears. I like the.
I think we found some common ground
Yeah,
there.
exactly. I like to find the common ground. Our next segment is something new that I've learned this week, and because I think you have to keep learning. If you don't keep learning, you're fundamentally dead.
Right.
There's just no reason to keep going. You gotta learn something.
That's right.
I think even just the ability to recognize that you have learned something is important too.
I agree.
Not necessarily that it's got to be some big life-changing thing, because this probably isn't ever going to be that big life. It's the little things that add up, right?
That's right, exactly. So the point is to stay curious and open to new information.
Stay curious, friend. Stay curious. Do you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I will go first. I learned this week that, to put it simply, I learned this week that creating a podcast is more difficult than one would expect. It looks like a lot of fun. It looks like a lot of fun, and it is a lot of fun. It's really fun to be able to, the way that I look at it from kind of a poet stand and an artist standpoint, it feels like being able to just slice yourself open and let everything fall out, but then you can put it all back together. And you come back and do it again, which sounds awesome, doesn't it?
It
to be able
sounds so
to
great.
cut yourself
Oh
open
my
and let
gosh.
everything fall out.
Love the analogy.
But it is. It's very nice. It's not. It's because we don't. It's hard to do this.
Yes.
This conversation. And I don't know exactly why. Because it doesn't feel like there. It feels like this is gonna sound shitty, but it almost feels like this is a way to monetize it, and make it important. Eventually.
Well, I guess I would like to start by saying that monetizing means nothing to me.
Yeah.
I really see this personally as way more of just an opportunity for certain conversations to take place that might not otherwise. And the even more important, just that there's a space where conversations can be had and opinions can be shared, where there's not judgment, where we're not going to start yelling at each other and shouting each other down.
Yeah.
And that's kind of hard to find these days. So.
And it's also nobody can shut it down.
Yeah.
There's no boss. There's no boss. I mean.
So let me
There's a
ask
couple
you this
bosses.
question really quick. What do you find hard about it?
The hard part is the technical part. The figuring out what needs to be satisfied in order for it to be here, in order for it to be there. That part's tough.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem like it needs to be that tough. But it's once you start digging in, I think, into that technology that you realize that there's not one technology. There is so much different. It feels like the internet's one big thing, which is absolutely not. I mean, if you go to one website and then go check out another one. You're like, why aren't these the same?
Right.
Why are they the same thing?
Right.
You know?
Well, and I give you a lot of credit for figuring this stuff out, and I think that's good advice to anybody that's listening. That it can be very overwhelming, but it's doable, and we're proof
just keep
that it's possible.
Sticking your face in that beehive.
That's right.
Well,
We didn't. That's right.
Eventually, it will come out deformed, and it'll be great for everybody to see. All right, on yours.
Okay, mine's a little bit of a bummer, but I'm just going to share it anyway.
I like bummers.
I learned this week that there was an international coalition of scientists who got together to compile all the data about cancer cases, and they created a list of all the countries in the world. Every single country in the world is on the list, and they're ranked in order of, I think someone wants attention here.
Here, you can hand it to me. I'll take it.
And they're ranked in order of the most number of cases of new cancers.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so the number one country in the world for the most new cancers is Australia.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we're right next to it is New Zealand.
So New Zealand is on the list too?
It's Australia and then New Zealand and then the United States.
Of course. We got to be up top.
But that's
We got to be up top. Right?
But that's crazy. We're like the most industrialized country in the world. We're the number one country in the world.
Yeah.
But we're the third largest producers of cancer in the world.
Just picture cancer factories. This is basically what we have.
That's not good news.
No, it's not good at all.
All right. Well, we'll leave that one behind for now. But
do you think it's Australia because of the sun?
I think it's an interesting idea. It makes sense to me. But of course, I don't have the list of what kinds of cancers these are. So
I've known one Australian person well. That was Ricky. In Prescott, and he fucking loved the sun, like so much. It was ridiculous, like to the degree that he loved it. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Maybe that has something to do with it.
Well, we can make that also another conversation sometime when we want to talk about healthcare, because I have a lot to say about healthcare.
Yeah, so I think the United States, though, I think the cancer in this country is probably predominantly because of food.
I agree, which is again another conversation.
Yeah, no doubt.
We've got the next 10 podcasts mapped out now.
Good. All right, we're on to our next topic here. It's going to be news from around the world. We kind of talked about this. Are we doing just headlines, or are we going to delve in a little bit?
Well, I thought for this first episode that I would just kind of bring out a couple of fun little things I found around the world. So it's pretty much just the headline, but...
And then, okay, cool.
Yeah, so we'll go through it quick.
Cool. Well, let's go through it slow.
All right. Well, you might not say
Slower.
that after I start talking.
Slower. No, okay. Yeah, go ahead and okay, headline number one. What do we have?
There was an art exhibit being held in London.
Okay.
And one of the exhibits in the art installation was a bunch of, let me see if I say this right. These were dead fish.
Okay.
Okay. But they were embroidered with sequins.
Okay.
And then put in plastic bags.
Okay.
And it was called Majestic Splendor.
Uh-huh.
It was a Korean artist who created this.
North or south?
Well, it's always south,
Okay.
pretty much, okay? If you've heard about them, it's probably South Korea. But what happened was, which apparently nobody expected this could happen, they exploded. They exploded and caught the entire thing on fire. So the venue where they were holding the whole art exhibit caught on fire.
The fish exploded into flames.
The fish exploded into flames and caught the entire thing on fire. So that was interesting.
I knew fish could explode, but I didn't think into flames.
Rotting fish carcasses exploding into flames.
Yeah,
look it up. It's an interesting story.
I had heard a thing a long time ago, if you don't mind if I make a little tangent here, but I heard a thing a long time ago that you have to be careful what rocks you pick up if you're building a campfire, because some of them will explode if they get hot.
Really?
Yeah. Never seen it happen. Never ever seen it happen. But I heard you gotta be careful. And I was like, what do you look for? And it's like, no idea. Just be careful somehow. That seems to be.
I don't think that's a thing.
I know, but
I don't think that's a thing.
it's stuck in my head. Every time I was at a campfire, I was like, those rocks are gonna explode.
All right. Well, you can look up this article about dead fish exploding.
Wow.
It's pretty weird.
That's crazy.
So the second thing, which is kind of neat, they have found the oldest tree in the world, the oldest scientifically proven tree in the world, and it's in southern Italy. It's 1,230 years old.
Whoa!
It's still growing, even today. So that means that it started life probably around like 789 AD, which was basically when the Vikings were landing in England.
Dang.
So this tree has been alive that entire time, and it's still alive today.
Wow.
That is just amazing.
So
I
as
love
these
that.
Vikings are getting off the boat, there's a little sapling tree
Right.
that's just like, and they're like,
Exactly.
that little tree.
Think about how many lifetimes of people that is.
People, like how many
it's
people
fascinating.
climbed it or walked around it, or deer, or like bear. Are there bear in England? I don't give a fuck. They scratch their backs on it.
Well, and I love the part that it's still growing. Like it hasn't even given up yet. It's still going. Nobody
Then-
knows how old it can become.
And then the whole universe of bugs and stuff that lived in it and all that stuff. That's crazy.
Really cool.
How many years old?
1,230 years old.
1,230. So even to imagine 230 years, that's almost like 3 lifetimes for a human being.
Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy.
Isn't that amazing?
That's
Like,
such a long time.
it could technically be that if your family lived by this tree, you could have had all of your ancestors could have, been touching that same tree. Anyways, I just
It's
think
interesting.
that's
Do you
the
think
coolest thing.
of trees as like a spirit, like a spirit? Like I think of trees as a nuisance. I don't like them. I don't mind this 1,000-year-old tree, but most of the time I hate them. They just seem like they're filled with bugs and they're really tall. I prefer a nice flat desert to that. But do you think of trees as like having a spirit?
Well, my personal experience of it is that they do. That trees are individual, that they're unique, and that they do have a life force within them that's unique to each tree. That's been my experience at least. But okay, last one.
Okay.
This was in Turkey. There was a soccer fan because they love soccer
In Turkey they do?
so much.
Okay.
So he was a soccer fan. He had gotten into some kind of altercation with somebody, and so the officials had banned him from the stadium for a year. Can't come in.
Yeah.
He was not about to be okay with that because he was not going to miss his soccer games.
He was into it.
So he hired a crane.
Wait, he hired a crane to lift him up in the air
Yes.
so he could watch a soccer
Yes.
match outside of it?
Yes.
Damn.
That's pretty smart, you have to admit.
That's interesting. So, like, are we talking about a wealthy guy here, do you think? Or
I don't think so.
you think he drained his savings account?
I think that it maybe is a little bit easier to arrange for stuff like that in Turkey, but maybe not. Who knows?
Maybe he had an uncle.
There you go. Maybe he had an
And his
uncle.
uncle was, like, just drunk enough to be like, this is a great idea.
Well, he totally did it, and the police came. The police were called, and they, are shouting with their bullhorns up to him. You have to come down and go away.
Wow. That's crazy. I heard a thing about Steve-O from Jackass. He climbed a crane one time to do a protest against SeaWorld, I think it was. And he got up there, and they called all the ambulances and all the cops in the whole entire city. And he was looking down, and he was like, this makes no sense at all. What am I even doing? Like, none of these people look like ants from where I'm at. I look like just a speck. It doesn't make any sense. It's not getting any point across whatsoever.
Oh, that's funny.
But I think hiring out a crane to watch a sports game that your kid
gotta hand it to the guy.
That's a fucking baller move.
I like
there.
it. Yep, I
That's
like
a baller move. I like that. That was good. I like that's thinking outside the box. Sticking it to the man.
Exactly.
I'm into that. Keep it hard. Our next segment is the Spokane Spot. This is where we talk about a little bit about Spokane, just briefly, because there's so many weird things here in this town that nobody knows about. And this week, the Spokane Spot is the Shogun restaurant that burnt down just recently.
Burnt to the ground.
It was an interesting place. It was one of those weird restaurants. It's in a spot that's like it's hard for me to explain. I'm sure there's a name for it, but it's where the roads. It's like on a corner.
Yeah, where the roads divide right in front of it.
Yeah, and so it's not like a corner of a street or something. It's like a slice of pizza corner. It's really weird. It just sort of sticks out there and stuff.
Had you ever been to the Shogun to eat?
This is an interesting question that you would ask me, because yes, I have been to the Shogun to eat with you one time, a long time ago. It was an interesting experience. I've never been cooked in front of except for at Subway.
So for the people that don't know, Shogun Restaurant was a restaurant where the chefs would cook in front of you.
Yes, it was a hibachi grill, is I think what they call that.
So they came to your table and cooked for the whole table.
Yeah.
Yes, it was very fancy.
It was very fancy. Very fancy. And we only had one experience there. And so, in my experience of it was that it was very nice.
Yes.
I enjoyed it.
Yes.
Now, had we gone back 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 times, maybe we would have had a different...
but in any event, you bring it up because it is no longer there.
It is gone. It was here for something like 30 years, just sitting there doing its thing, and then one day, gone.
Right. And
Done.
I'm curious, I don't know if the restaurant had closed prior to it catching on fire, so it's kind of a mystery here in Spokane. We don't know what happened to the Shogun restaurant.
We have no idea. Do you want to hear an extra little story, a bonus story about the Shogun restaurant? It's a third-hand story. So I heard it from somebody who worked there. Okay. It's gross.
Okay.
I mean, it's gross, but it's also kind of like, yeah, I'd probably do that. So this is a hibachi grill. This is so you have sushi. They have all this different stuff. They had a dishwasher there, and I heard this from somebody who worked at this place before. They had a dishwasher there who used to work up in Alaska, do it at the fish canneries and stuff like that. So I imagine a real hard, tough guy with the big old, I don't know, big beard, whatever. Anyway, he was a dishwasher, and when he would bus tables, he would bring bus tubs back, and he had to scrape the food off of the plates. He would scrape them into a hand washing sink, and then just get a fork and start eating out of that sink all night long. Now, at first that sounds like a really bad idea, but then when you start to think about it...
maybe he was figuring it's a hand-washing sink, it's sanitized.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he cleaned out the sink.
Right.
So, all things considered, he cleans out the sink, he plugs it up, he just starts filling it with old food from off the plates, right? Leftover. It's going to go in the garbage anyway.
Right.
So it's in there. The part that gets me isn't necessarily the eating the food off the plates. That's fine, whatever. It's the just grab a fork and just go for it. Just
it's
whatever
all mixed together.
Yeah.
It's been there for who knows how long. Oh, that doesn't sound healthy. I don't think that's good.
I told him it was like they call it sink soup or something.
Oh my God.
They call it sink soup. It's delicious.
All right, we can say this because again, the Shogun restaurant is no longer there.
It's gone. So it is definitely gone. And actually, I walked up to it the other day to look around. I wanted to take a picture of it for whatever reason. Walked up and looked around in it, and it is very gone.
Yeah.
It is definitely. It's one of those. There's a lot of.
We are not saying it was arson. We're not saying that.
And we didn't.
We definitely it had nothing to do with it. So we are commenting on it.
But there is actually a lot of buildings around town that are burnt down, and they'll put fences up around them and just leave them there forever. I don't know if that's an investigative process or something like that takes a long time, but...
I think it's partly that, and also partly that the owner is responsible for cleaning it up. And so if they've abandoned the building, then...
And if they own the property...
Yeah, exactly.
It's their property. They do whatever the fuck they want.
They can sit there forever if they want to.
Big building up in Hilliard that's burnt down that's still just hanging out there. There's another one on Sprague. I didn't do it. It wasn't me.
Spokane is a lot of other things besides burned out buildings.
Totally, and we'll get to those. Yes. But the Shogun is on my mind. So we've come close to the end of the show. Close to the end of the show.
Nearly there, really.
Yes. Our last segment, our last official segment is an inspirational quote of the day that Angela has found, cultivated, curated for us, and then after she tells us about who said the quote, tells us the quote, I get the opportunity to shit on it.
It's fun for everybody.
It's fun for everybody because I'm not the kind of inspirational quote type of guy.
And I really am. I like
Yeah.
inspirational.
And some people are, and it works for them, and I have no... Those people are okay with me. I give them permission to exist on this planet.
Well, this is why there's both of us, because I'm speaking to all the people that really want to hear this, and then you're speaking to the rest of the people.
We are a couple of opposites. We're very, very different, almost so much different that we loop back around. And it's like we're standing with our backs on one side of the door. You know, both of us. We see things quite a bit different, but it works. It meshes.
It does.
It works. It's a lot of work to get to where it works.
Yes, exactly. It was. And that's one of the things that we hope to bring to people is the realization that...
it's okay to shit on inspirational quotes.
And it's okay to say inspirational
Exactly.
quotes.
Both of those things are totally fine. So what do you have for us?
All right. Today's quote comes from Loyd Wright. And he was a very famous architect, designer, and writer.
Okay.
He died in the 50s,
Uh-huh.
but he was very famous mainly as an architect. He was the person that defined the concept of organic architecture.
What does that mean, organic architecture?
Well, it can mean different things, but basically what it means is creating architecture that works with the surrounding environment, as opposed to trying to... Do you hear our dog?
Yeah, I hear.
Yeah, I think she's letting us know we're almost
getting
done.
close.
We're almost out of time. Okay, I'm going to move on to the quote.
Okay.
It is, you have to go wholeheartedly into something in order to achieve anything worth having.
You have to go wholeheartedly into something. This sounds...
In order to have anything worth achieving.
Worth achieving?
Achieve anything worth having.
Okay, to achieve anything.
And I think that's true because look at this example of a podcast. We have to jump in. We have to go in wholeheartedly.
You got to go in wholeheartedly. That
That's
is the truth. So, one more time, the quote is...
You have to go wholeheartedly into something in order to achieve anything worth having.
This definitely sounds like a quote that a scumbag womanizer would put out into the world.
Oh my god, you know, that's horrible.
Shitty architecture.
Oh my god. No, come on now. You can't just say that. That's a good quote.
Frank Loyd Wright was a womanizer. He had several. He was one of the, what do you call that? Like he had a whole bunch of different ladies. Isn't that what that?
That is completely beyond the point of this quote.
No, it's not.
The quote still stands.
No, well, yeah. So you
do you disagree with the quote?
It seems to me that what he is doing is putting value before everything. He's taking something like an idea, an achievement, because an achievement is basically an idea. You know what I mean? Whatever it is, even if it's a physical manifestation, it's an idea that this thing that I manifested needed to be here. And he's saying that in addition to needing to be here, we need to put a value on it. And so that's what I get from this quote, is that he was a piece of shit, and I'm glad he's dead.
Oh my god. Okay, we're going to have to work on that. You're going to have to come with a better game than that next time.
Wasn't that good enough?
No, it wasn't.
You don't think so?
No, we'll work on that. We'll work on that section.
Wasn't he a womanizer though? Can't we agree on that?
So
is that a bad thing to be a womanizer?
That's again a whole nother show. So welcome, thank you for joining us.
Hold on now.
On this show.
You're not on social media.
No.
Tell me what? No, I'm just joking. Don't worry about it. So not on social media. So if you want to get a hold of Angela, do it through me. I'm on social media. I'm fucking everywhere on social media.
Well, and you can just get a hold of us through Don't Be Fun.
Yes, Don't Be Fun, basically everywhere. Except for where it counts, which is basically where this podcast is. It's probably not Don't Be Fun. But Don't Be Fun on Facebook is probably the best way. It's all lowercase, one word.
Yeah, and please feel free to contact us.
Yeah,
I mean, unless
give us
you're
ideas.
A hater or a heckler, and then we kind of don't have time.
Contact me if you're a hater or a heckler.
Oh yeah, Derek is fine with that.
I don't mind. I'm good with it. But if you have any ideas, if you want to be on the show, just give us a shout out. We're on everything: Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook.
And we'll be having guests on
YouTube.
Also to plug the things that they have going on. So we might have guests on that are comedians or other people that we can then announce the shows that
Speaking
they have.
of comedians, I'm a comic.
That's right.
I do
Derek
comedy
is.
here in
Yes, he does.
Spokane. You can come see me. I do open mics everywhere. If there's an open mic, I'm probably going to be there, lurking in the corner, just glowering at everybody, and then So come and check it out. That's it for this week. Thank you.
Thanks for joining
so much.
us.
This has
Thank
been
you.
a lot of fun. I hope you had a good time. I had a really good time. I hope you had a good time too.
You had a good time.
You had a good time too. Everybody had a good time. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.